Hi everyone, Michael A. Bryan here from the Oraculos School of Astrology, and today we're going to take our final look at the chart of Jeffrey Epstein, but this time from the perspective of Uranian astrology. For those of you who don't know, Uranian astrology is a system of astrology that allows us to see connections that exist within our chart that we wouldn't see from a normal, traditional astrological perspective. Looking at our chart under the lens of Uranian astrology is essentially the same as looking at our chart under a microscope. So the sort of combinations that we see within our chart from a Uranian perspective are combinations that give us further insight into not only the concrete realities of who we are as people, but also into who we are based on the concrete events that occur within our lives. So today, that's going to be our exploration into the life and times of Jeffrey Epstein from his natal chart, and I sincerely hope you enjoy. And if you haven't already taken a look at this Jeffrey Epstein series, please make sure to look at the first video and the subsequent videos within this series so that you can understand how we've built up to this moment today. And if you love the work that we're doing over here at the Oraculos podcast, please make sure to go down below and subscribe to the Oraculos podcast, especially if you're listening to us over on YouTube, and also hit the notification bell so that you can receive notifications of when we come out with these episodes every single week. Do enjoy. All right, everyone. So here on the screen, we have the chart of Jeffrey Epstein, but on the 90-degree dial. The 90-degree dial is one of the primary tools that we use within Uranian astrology because it primarily shows us our hard aspects within our natal chart, but it also shows us our non-traditional, smaller hard aspects that we usually don't consider. Now, on the screen, we see our traditional planets. We see the modern planets of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, but we also see some additional factors, which are our 8 Trans-Neptunian planets. And they are Cupido, Hades, Zeus, Kronos, Apollon, Admetos, Vulcanus, and Poseidon. These are the 8 Trans-Neptunian planets that we utilize within Uranian astrology. Ultimately, if we did Uranian astrology without the Trans-Neptunian planets, we could call it cosmobiology, because that is essentially what cosmobiology is. However, to give you a full taste and understanding of what Uranian astrology is and the sorts of tools and techniques that we utilize within the system, we will also include the Trans-Neptunian planets. Whenever I begin a Uranian astrology consultation, I always put the pointer on the midheaven. One of the unique factors of Uranian astrology is that we have a movable dial. And that movable dial is significant because it allows us to see the planetary pictures and the specific planetary combinations that are occurring with the individual elements within the chart. The reason why I put the pointer on the midheaven is because from a Uranian perspective, the midheaven represents the soul of the native. The midheaven represents the me, myself, and I of the native. And it represents how that person is specifically organizing their identity within this lifetime. So with this midheaven, we automatically see that there are certain planets or Trans-Neptunian planets as well that are being tied into his midheaven axis. We automatically see that he has Sun, Hades, and Node equidistant from the midheaven. In other words, his midheaven is on his Sun node midpoint, but it's also on his Hades node midpoint. Now, the Sun node as a combination is a lackluster combination as far as I'm concerned, because Sun and Node together simply is indicating our physical, intimate connections within the world. The Sun gives us the word physical, the Node gives us the word intimate connections. So there's nothing quite significant for me as far as Sun Node is concerned. What I think is significant about this, though, is that he has Hades connected to that. Now, this trans-Neptunian planet of Hades is exactly what it sounds like. Hades represents the dark, the ugly, the grungy underbelly of the human experience. Hades represents things that we consider to be repulsive or disgusting or ugly or just bad or terrible for human life. So what this is saying with the pointer pointing on his midheaven is that the physical intimate connections that he's forming, Sun Node, are carrying a level of repulsiveness to them. Or the physical intimate connections that he's forming are carrying a level of disgust within them. Or he's forming intimate connections with people who represent the very underworld or the demonic underbelly of the human experience. Now, if we go and look at the interpretation of this combination of Hades node, we see that it represents a mean act committed jointly. Therefore, Hades node represents that there is a cabal of people who are performing a mean act together as one unit. It represents unpleasant associations and connections started under difficulties or with reluctance. So what this combination is saying to us is that he could be a part of a group or an organization of people who is representing the dirtiest part of our human experience. And when we subtract the midheaven from that axis, it says to be connected professionally with criminals. And this is essentially who he was. He was the criminal kingpin in a lot of people's lives. So this combination means to be connected professionally with criminals. And it also has to do with forced insults and abuse, to suffer from great meanness, forced to deal with base and vulgar people. So essentially, this represents the sort of connections that he would have had within the world at large, and it also represents his level of interacting with those sorts of people as well. Now, on the opposite side of this midheaven, we see that he is having the planet Apollon there. Apollon is the Uranian astrology planet that has to do with our concept of far and wide. And when a person has midheaven Apollon, it says that this person has a network of connections that extends far and wide. But it also says that the native himself may be a brilliant thinker, he may be a scientific thinker, and as a result of his own brilliant mind, he finds himself connecting with the world at large in ways where people want to essentially hear his voice. If we pull up midheaven Apollon and see what our interpretation box says for that, it says one's own life experience and the mental horizon. So this is something that we see manifesting within him, that he himself had a broadened horizon or a broadened perspective about the world at large. And that could have been a very attractive thing for those around him. And that could have been why he himself was so fortunate in his connections with others within the world at large. Now, we also see that he has Uranus, Zeus landing on this connection, which is a very explosive connection. It has to do with the sudden outbreak of war, fire explosions, a bolt of lightning, electric motor, generator, dynamo, discharge of firearms, to fire, to splinter. So therefore, this is saying that he himself was a very dynamic person, or is a very dynamic person, completely guided by his own will and the authority that that will gives him. And he's also guided from this place of doing the thing that is big and explosive and doing the thing that represents something that is jarring or that has a great level of shock value. When we subtract from that the midheaven, we see that it says energetic willpower, to be strong-willed, to be a dictator, to be subjected to an inner force. Now, we know that the inner force that he was subjected to was the force of his own proclivities and the force of his own cravings. And we know that those cravings weren't necessarily good for him or anybody, but we know that that is true within the context of his life. Now, another thing that we see here that is significant is that his midheaven is having a combination with this Mars, based on the fact that Mars is landing on that very tiny dot. That very tiny dot is the smallest hard aspect at our disposal within Uranian astrology, and it's called the 64th harmonic. And that 64th harmonic is saying that this Mars is separated from this gentleman's midheaven by an aspect that has the value of 5 degrees, 37 minutes, and 30 seconds. Because 5 degrees, 37 minutes, and 30 seconds is the smallest hard aspect that we have within Uranian astrology, it is something that we use. And the reason why it's the smallest hard aspect that we have within Uranian astrology is because if you take 5 degrees, 37 minutes, and 30 seconds, and you multiply that by 2, you get 11 degrees and 15 minutes. If you take 11 degrees and 15 minutes and you multiply that by 2, you get 22 degrees and 30 minutes. If you take 22 degrees and 30 minutes and you multiply that by 2, you get 45 degrees, which is the basis of our semi-squares and our sesquiquadrates. If you take the number 45 and you multiply that by 2, you get 90 degrees, which is the basis for our squares and oppositions. If you take 90 degrees and multiply that by 2, you get 180 degrees, which is the basis for our oppositions as well as our conjunctions. And if you take the 180 degrees and you multiply that by 2, you get 360 degrees, which is the number of degrees within our zodiac, and also the basis of our conjunctions. So the reality of this is that this aspect, even though it isn't something that we usually consider within our normal day-to-day astrological practice, it is very much a part of the hard aspect series of aspects as any other series of aspects we might consider. Now, on the note of these small dots, I also notice that he is having Pluto and Kronos equidistant from this small dot here. As Uranian astrologers, our eyes are trained to see symmetries. Therefore, I know that if I were to put the pointer on this Pluto-Kronos midpoint, then we should end up seeing a small dot on the midheaven, saying that his midheaven is also connected to the Pluto-Kronos midpoint. Let's go and take a look. If you love the astrology that you see here on the Oraculos podcast and you want to dive into the lab where we are practicing not only this astrology, but also the magical tools that have made me who I am today, then by all means join us in Michael's Cosmic Conservatory. In Michael's Cosmic Conservatory, I teach you everything that is within me, not just about astrology, but also about the magical practices such as the Kabbalistic Tarot, geomancy, and other forms of astral divination so that you can increase not only your astrological knowledge, but also so that you can deepen your spiritual connection to this astrology that we know and love. So if this is something that you're interested in, then by all means join us in our members-only space, Michael's Cosmic Conservatory, and dive into the magic that we share there each and every month. So in putting the pointer on the Pluto-Kronos midpoint, we see that the midheaven is exactly landing on that small dot in relation to those planets. What that means is that this midheaven and his character is also going to be modulated based on Pluto-Kronos. The rules for planetary pictures says to us that Pluto-Kronos has to do with the development of ability or skill, changes in the form of government, examinations, testing, change of boss. It is the kernel formula for the new rich, the self-made man, and the man who works his way up to ascend in rank. Now, Jeffrey Epstein is a man who had no college degree, but yet he worked his way up, and he ended up teaching at one of the most prestigious schools in America. He also, as a person having no college degree, ended up being one of the most influential financiers. Not necessarily because of his financial profile, but more so because of the level of criminal activity that was wrapped up within his quote-unquote financial business dealings in the world at large. So Jeffrey Epstein definitely is representing the self-made man, as this Pluto-Kronos combination suggests. He definitely represented the new rich insofar as he built himself up from scratch, and he definitely represented somebody for whom doors and ranks were open for him, even though we had no idea who he was or why those ranks should be open for him to begin with. Now, in pulling that up, what I also automatically see is that in looking at that Pluto-Kronos midpoint, we have Venus, Hades, and Sun also as a part of that axis. And the Venus-Hades has to do with repulsive love. Venus-Hades has to do with prostitution, solicitation. It has to do with the very worst things that one could imagine happening within one's romantic affairs. When we go and look at Venus-Hades, what we see is it says low purchasable love, to grieve, adversities in love, voluntary sterility, a hidden love affair, maid servant, waitress, domestic servant, servitude, repulsiveness in love, love worries, and dirty-minded. And we could definitely say that Jeffrey Epstein was a person who expressed some great level of repulsiveness in love, and that he must also have been quite dirty-minded. Now, if we were to subtract the sun from this axis, and I'm only saying let's subtract the sun because we also see the sun is a part of that axis, Venus-Hades minus the sun, it says to succumb or to give in to prostitution, to find oneself in a low position and dependence, sexual weakness of the body. So he definitely was a man who succumbed to prostitution. He definitely was a man who expressed a sexual weakness of his body, because the reality is, without any provocation whatsoever, Jeffrey Epstein had the specific sexual desires that he had. And those sexual desires got him into trouble not only one time, but several times. And some would say, even led to his demise. Now that we're done assessing his midheaven, the next thing that I would do is I would assess his sun. And as we see within this chart, he is having Sun in a conjunction with Hades on the 90-degree dial. Now, this could mean that he has Sun conjunct Hades in general, but it could also mean that he could have the Sun square Hades or the Sun opposite Hades. Because remember, this is a 90-degree dial, which means that the conjunction, the square, and the opposition are all going to look like the same thing. And so this Sun Hades is having to do with the repulsive man, the ugly man, the man who makes his way in the world through low and base actions. And if we were to pull this up on the interpretation, it says the diseased body, the deformed or mutilated body. One of the questions that was asked in his deposition by a lawyer was that some of the girls who he brought over to the house said that he had an egg-shaped penis. And the lawyer wanted to know whether or not that was actually the truth. Does he have an egg-shaped penis? And Jeffrey smiled, he got up, and he walked away. But the Sun-Hades combination has to do with the deformed or mutilated body, to be oppressed or hindered in developing the body and personality, to be pursued by misfortune, to be a carrier of secrets and physical troubles. I'm pretty sure that we can admit and accept that Jeffrey was a carrier of secrets of not just himself, but also of many people. And apparently now that he is quote-unquote dead, the world may never know what those secrets are, because the government isn't seeming to be forthcoming with telling what those secrets are. Now, in putting the pointer on this Sun Hades, we also find that Jupiter is standing here on the tiniest dot in relationship to that. And I know that Jupiter Hades has to do with dirty money. We can look it up and see. And having the sun there is definitely going to indicate the man who makes his money in a dirty way. So Jupiter Hades has to do with lack of money, saddened, or disturbed happiness or good fortune, dirty talk, indecent remarks, to be lucky with raw materials, luck in black market dealings. I even forgot about the luck in the black market dealings, but it also has to do with luck or fortune in black market dealings, which I guess is the same as saying somebody has dirty money. For them to have luck or fortune in black market dealings, which is what the Jupiter Hades is indicative of. Now, if we look at the sun and what the sun does to that combination, it says the person with lung troubles, to be or become poor, the daily worries, the man with worries. That could be one part of it, but it also means the man who makes his money through black market dealings. Now, in putting that pointer on the sun, we see something that wasn't obvious to us in our first look at Jeffrey's chart. We see that he has the sun in a hard aspect relationship with Pluto. We know this because Pluto is landing on that large dot in relationship to the sun. Sun Pluto has to do with the man who is commanding and demanding, the man who leads his world through fear, the man who leads his world through manipulating and taking advantage of others, the man who leads his world through completely subjecting other people around him to traumas that are unspeakable. So this is something else that we see with that combination. Now, we also see that that sun is picking up the combination of midheaven, Neptune, and sun midheaven could indicate to us that his physical body, sun is body, midheaven is so my physical body is a body that's weak. My physical body is a body that is susceptible to everything and every disease and every sort of infection around me. I have a weak constitution in general. So possibly a part of how I express some level of power in the world, since I'm in this body that doesn't really have that much strength, is maybe I express my power through the power that I can have over others around me. We also see that he has this sun Hades standing with this Mars. And this is actually one of the more concerning combinations within his chart for me, because if we were to look at sun Hades and take a look at what Mars means on that axis, it has to do with blood diseases, occupation with waste, material, and garbage, to cause trouble, ruffians, the man inclines to brawls, and to be inclined to homicide. Now, we don't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein as far as homicide is concerned. However, there is quite a bit of talk going on at the moment that is indicating that Jeffrey Epstein may also have been at the center of a ring of ritualistic murders and cannibalism. Now, whether or not this is true has yet to be fully determined, but within the Epstein files, there is quite a bit of talk about them eating a particular type of food that is a pretty common food that everybody has disposal to. So the fact that it shows up thousands of times within the Epstein files has caused people to be on high alert to think that this food that they're referring to is actually referring or could be referring to human flesh. So this is another thing that we see within this chart. Now, as we go around and bring this to a close, we've taken a look at the midheaven. We've taken a look at the sun. The next thing for us to take a look at is ultimately the moon. And the reason why we like to take a look at the moon is because the moon is going to represent our emotional interiority, but it also represents our mother, and it also represents our early domestic affairs. And here we see the moon is having a 45-degree relationship with the Pluto, which is saying that a part of his life with his mother may have been very traumatizing. She could have been a very traumatizing person. She could have been a very commanding and demanding person. She could have been somebody who led him to hell. And so when he thinks about his relationship with women in the world, he thinks about women dragging him to hell from a very early age, because that could have been what he experienced with his mother. We also see that his mother is tied in with this Hades connection, And so both his parents, his father and his mother, is drawing in this Hades nature, saying that both his parents and his family life with both of those parents ultimately dragged him to hell from a very early age. And all he knew about human intimacy via his parents was a life that ultimately felt unkind and cruel and dirty, and it left him feeling deformed and ugly and unwanted. Now, as we take a look at the final personal point within this, we see that his ascendant is in a conjunction with Poseidon. And once again, on the 90-degree dial, a conjunction can be either a square, an opposition, or a conjunction. And if you want more information about Uranian astrology, we definitely currently have Uranian astrology courses for sale in our shop over on our Oraculos website. So if you're looking to learn more about Uranian astrology, you can find out more about it there. But his ascendant with Poseidon is saying that he could have come from a home of very intelligent people. He could have also come from a home with highly religious people, because Poseidon has to do with our mind and the culturing of our mind, and the culturing of our mind as a result of going to university, or the culturing of our mind as a result of being in a religious household. So this says spiritual surroundings, spiritual acquaintances, others are intelligent, mentally or spiritually connected with others. These are the things that we see in relation to the Poseidon. We also see that his early childhood environment, as represented by that ascendant, represented his major sense or his major source of disappointment that would later manifest for him in the world at large. We get this idea of the world at large from 0 degrees of the cardinal signs, which is what this Aries is indicating. And that could say that for him, his idea of the world at large was rooted in disappointment, and that first came and arose out of his own early childhood environment. With his ascendant, we also find that he is having Zeus in a 45-degree relationship with his ascendant. And this has to do, Zeus is one of the planets that we associate with leadership. And this could say that in his own environment, he may have been in an environment where he was surrounded with leaders, possibly even spiritual leaders, because we have Poseidon there as well. But it can also indicate that he himself, based on his own philosophical approach to life, was a leader within the lives of others as well. And regardless of what you think about him, based on the fact that the Epstein files are the files that are actively bringing down empire as we speak, it is true, or it is seeming to be true, that he represented both the spiritual as well as the mental and the moral compass for a lot of people, because he persuaded so many people to let this internal part of themselves out into the world, even though that part of themselves was fundamentally rooted in darkness. So this is what we see via the ascendant. Now, we also like to take a look at the node, because the node is representing our intimate connections with others. And we see that his intimate connections are with people in great positions of authority and leadership. And the reason for that is because the node is bringing in this Kronos, because Kronos is landing on that small dot. So if we were to pull in our interpretation of node Kronos, we would see that it says connections with the authorities, diplomatic connections, which is another reason why I'm not necessarily sure that he is as dead as a doorknob as people would like for us to believe, because he has diplomatic connections, because he has connections with the authorities. So why do we feel that the man that bore this much influence in the world would suddenly, all of a sudden, nix himself? People say maybe somebody else did it. I say that I don't know. Finally, we see that this node is also pulling in this Cupido by a 45-degree aspect, and also this Venus, saying that his intimate connections with others were connections that were rooted in love and romance and opulence and art and beauty and warmth and just making the world feel like a wonderful place. This was fundamentally what it means for him to have the node Venus. It also says that he has a lot of intimate connections with artists and entertainers. So we have yet to see some of the artists and entertainers who are fully implicated within these Epstein files, but we see that the leaders of the art and the entertainment world, leaders coming from Kronos, art and entertainment coming from the Venus, represents his intimate connections and his family, ultimately, because Cupido is our Uranian astrology planet that is representing the family. So the family of people who he amassed around himself were people who represented the authorities within the world in general, but also some of the leading figures within the art and the entertainment industry, and that represented for him his source of intimate connections within this lifetime. The Jupiter being right next to that node is saying to us that he forms intimate connections with the rich and the famous and with people who are extraordinarily influential. And if we were to pull up the interpretation for that, it says good relationships as well as fortunate unions. So this is how we would take a look at Jeffrey Epstein's chart in a very rudimentary way using the tools of Uranian astrology. I believe that the tools that we use and that we have access to in Uranian astrology are powerful, and they help us to see things in our charts that we probably wouldn't see using other methods. And it's not to say that other methods aren't going to show us that same information, but I think that there's a point at which when we use Uranian astrology, we realize that Uranian astrology has the ability to show us more. And I don't even know if more is better. And I think that today, a lot of Uranian astrologers have this understanding of themselves that we practice a better type of astrology because look at how much more information we can tap into. But I don't even think that more is better because I don't think that the Uranian information that we just uncovered is better than the information that we uncovered previously using our traditional astrological tools or models. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, astrology is a kaleidoscope. Astrology is a hologram. You split it and look at it from one perspective, and it shows you the fullness of who you are. You split it and look at it from another perspective, and it shows you the fullness of who you are. So do I think that the world needs to practice Uranian astrology in order to practice concrete astrology? No, I don't. I think that we are very much well equipped to practice concrete astrology with our traditional astrological tools. And it isn't the type of astrology that we practice that causes us to be better astrologers or not. Because I don't think that Uranian astrology is better than traditional astrology. But I do believe that it is an internal orientation within the astrologer that causes us to be better astrologers. We have to commit ourselves to practicing astrology at the highest level. We have to commit ourselves to practicing astrology that isn't just about psychology. We're in the year 2026. We have bigger fish to fry than you have sun in Taurus and therefore you like to eat in bed, or you have sun in Gemini, therefore you're an inquisitive person. There is so much more to be done than just to analyze our personalities, and the fact that we're still using astrology to only do that is nuts. So the reality is that we have to commit ourselves, regardless of what system of astrology we're practicing, to practice in a concrete and an event-based way, because that's the only thing that makes us better astrologers. Because you can be an awful traditional astrologer who's full of information but has no demonstrable skills or abilities. You could be an awful Uranian astrologer who's full of information but has no demonstrable skills or abilities. You could be an awful Jyotish Indian astrologer who can't demonstrate real concrete astrology to save your life. So it's not that practicing one type of astrology makes you a better astrologer than another. It is what is your internal orientation as you practice that astrology. Are you internally oriented to practicing in a concrete event-based way? Because if you aren't, as far as I'm concerned, you're only a part of a problem that doesn't seem to be finishing anytime soon, because this idea of practicing astrology that is light and fluffy and pure and holy and all of these things is only making us seem more and more unbelievable. to the non-astrological thinker. And I think that it is about time that we realize that we cannot continue to silo ourselves and live in isolation in some incestuous relationship between astrologers and other astrologers, but we also have to be able to explain what we do to the world at large. And if we can't explain what we do to the world at large, chances are we don't understand it well enough. So Uranian astrology is wonderful and amazing. Traditional astrology is wonderful and amazing. And they both stand to support each other if the internal orientation of the person practicing them is an orientation towards practicing in a way that is concrete, that is clear, that is accurate, and that is based in the actual events that create our lives. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining me once again. I always enjoy being here. You all make me so happy, and I could not be happier than I am when I'm sharing space with you. Once again, if you loved this video, please make sure to like this video wherever you are watching it online. Also, if you haven't already subscribed to the Oraculos podcast, please make sure to subscribe to the Oraculos podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to hit the notification bell so that you can receive notifications of when we come out with episodes each and every week. I also want to plug my book, The New Western Medical Astrology, Pathways Towards the Cosmos Indwelling. I feel like I'm a pretty good judge of character, and I feel like I have a very solid sense and understanding of when something is good and when something is not good. I never blow air up my own behind if I think that I'm actually doing a bad job. And I can guarantee you that this is an excellent book. It's an excellent book from the perspective of learning Uranian astrology. It's an excellent book from the perspective of learning natal astrology. It's an excellent book from the perspective of just learning medical astrology. It is a wonderful book. And if you've purchased this book and this book has changed the landscape of your astrological practice, then please do go over to Amazon, leave us a review letting the world know how this book has impacted your medical astrology practice and just your astrology practice in general. And if you would like, you can take a screenshot of that review and send it to us at hello@oraculosastrology.com to receive a free gift, which is my as of yet unpublished PDF file for navigating your financial destiny, which is the chapter on money and finances, which is going to be coming out in my upcoming natal astrology book. So if you would like to receive that now to better know how to navigate your own financial destiny, then please take a screenshot of the review that you leave us over on Amazon, whether it's for this book or whether it's for any of the 3 books ultimately, and we will send you a free gift as my token of love for your continued support of my practice. Thank you, everyone. I love you so much. And until next time being next week, I'll see you soon. Have a good one, everybody. Bye for now.